Don't screw this up, Matt.
Oh no, the pressure's on. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. I'm Matt with MovieWeb. This is bananas, bonkers, beautiful movie. It's wild. It really reminds me of the late 80s, 90s, sort of cutting edge. Did I just see that? Did they just do that sort of films you'd see? And of course, Stuart Gordon is honored throughout this. And I guess I'll start with Barbara. I mean, you worked with him in the past, and this film is so much sort of a continuation and an homage to Gordon in different ways. What was the importance for you of honoring his legacy, and what was your metric for doing it right?
That's a big question. I feel like Stuart Gordon gave me my career, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for him. Maybe I'd be doing something else. I don't know. But his movies were so iconic, and they're just beloved by so many in the horror genre. And, I didn't even realize that I was doing horror until I came back with You're Next, like 12 years ago. And I went, oh, I guess I do a lot of horror films. So, this is kind of the space that I live in. And I also, with this film, I realized my roots go back to Lovecraft. And when Stuart passed, he had been trying to make this movie and wasn't able to for a number of reasons for a number of years. And when I read it, after sort of reconvening with Dennis Paoli over the death of Stuart, and I asked, what do you have lying on your shelf that you guys didn't do? He sent me this, and I didn't know it was going to be a Lovecraft film. And then I read it, and it was Lovecraft. And I thought to myself at the time, this is my legacy. Lovecraft is really my legacy. I don't know if it's horror because I've done a lot of other things, but it really is Lovecraft. And I love the script, and I wanted to do him justice, and I wanted to do the story justice. And I, was able to work with Dennis Paoli again, who I love, and work in the universe of Lovecraft, and also bringing Joe in, who I had come to know his work over the past few years. I thought that he was really the best match for the material, and it means everything to me. It's just continuing the Lovecraft universe and continuing where I came from the beginning.
That's awesome. And you look and are amazing in this. Such a boss in this. And Joe, Carrie, sort of piggybacking off of that. Lovecraft, it's kind of surprising he hasn't been, canceled or whatever you want to call it. He was kind of, awful in different ways, but the work transcends it. And it's, I love Lovecraft, obviously, and people keep making Lovecraft. 2 great episodes of Cabinet of Curiosity last year were Lovecraft. What do you think has kept his work alive, and what interests you about it?
Really good question. Because you're right. Like, there's been years, and man, you don't want to get film Twitter started sometimes when it comes to, who are we going to cancel next? Oh, they're dead. Doesn't matter. Let's go back in time. Who cares? Lovecraft has been, somewhat problematic in terms of just some of his thematics, how he, treated certain characters, certain people, his viewpoints, which, to be fair, had, before he died, he did backtrack and say, it's like, maybe I was a little wrong there. But sometimes you do have to separate art from artist. And, what he contributed to the horror genre, to the science fiction genre, to literature in general, is something that cannot be denied. And, whether or not people find some of his politics problematic or not, you can't deny that you can look at and read some of his prose and some of his ideas and see how forward thinking he was. And that was something that, because of Reanimator, the original Reanimator that Stuart directed, and because there was an H.P. Lovecraft above the title, and not this one, but there was one back then, it immediately made me go, who is this Lovecraft? Maybe I should stop reading Stephen King for a minute and check this guy out. And immediately it blew my mind, because there were just ideas that expanded my thinking about other worlds, cosmic horror, fear of the body, fear of the unknown, fear of one's self and identity. And those sort of things were like, they really just opened my mind up, without psychotropic drugs or anything, that made you go, there's a bigger world out there than just slasher flicks at the time, in the 80s. And that really just got me excited to more seek out what other filmmakers were doing with Lovecraft. I never in a million years would have thought that I would have the opportunity to take that Lovecraftian baton or have the torch passed on to me, until I got that fateful email that day from Barbara. And, this was at a time when everybody was going, what the hell are we doing? It was literally weeks after the pandemic. And I was at a crossroads in my own life, and I was going through a really hard time. And sometimes you need those things, like sometimes that we all go through real trials and tribulations, whether it's on a global scale or right in your doorstep, so to speak. And when I got that script, so this is where Barbara's going to get me now, because before we were making Barbara cry, now she's going to get me. Barbara Crampton's email saved my life, bar none. Having this project come to me at this very particular moment in my life meant the world. And it was, even if you want on a surface level, see that this was like a good distraction. Good, here, Joe, work on this script, come up with some ideas and we'll figure it out and we'll go from there. Maybe it'll get made, maybe it won't, who knows? But it was the right sort of project. It was the right sort of creative, artistic endeavor that I needed in my life at that very moment. And I'll never stop thanking her for that. And it really was something that, everyone says that, like right around this time too, like right when it's like you're in PR mode, it becomes, well, it's my most personal film, or it's like, oh, this was a real passion project. I can honestly say that this may be one of the most personal things that I've ever done. And it wouldn't be without having Judah and Jonathan and Barbara and Heather and Dennis and Brian and all these people supporting me and supporting this idea. And plus we got to make a really cool, like psychotropic, like transgressive horror, psychological thriller at the same time. But that didn't, that comes from Barbara having the faith in me and being able to say to myself, like, what could I do with Lovecraft? And, and this is the result.
That sounds like a lifesaver for you, and equally sweet. And
damn it. Son of a bitch, Crampton.
Yeah, I'd love to delve into that more, but I definitely want to talk to everyone. Heather, this is a raw, sort of risky performance, and it's a testament to your career that it's arguably not your most vulnerable emotionally and physically, because you've done so much. You've sort of, your soul is put on display on a lot of things. And
oh, thank you. That's an amazing thing to say. Thank you.
Yeah, but do you think is there anything, do you notice that trend? Are you attracted to sort of vulnerable roles, or like emotionally and like risky roles?
I mean, I think what I really admire in people and art is when people are really raw and real about what they're actually really going through. And kind of what Joe was saying, like the more personal you make something, and I feel like I can feel that when I'm watching other people's art, that I really respond to that. So that is definitely my goal, is to do stuff like that, because I feel like the more open and vulnerable and raw you are, I think the more potentially people can relate, and I think kind of one of the points of being an actor and one of like what we're doing is we want to tell a story that's kind of a human experience that we all might go through in different moments. Maybe we can relate to all the characters and just relating to these human experiences. And that's what I hope for.
Awesome. And yeah, I'd love to circle back on that if I have time, but I definitely want to ask Judah. I mean, there are so many human emotions here. The movie's wild enough that it kind of calls for broadness, sort of bigness, especially in performances. Did you ever have conversations about going too big or being too broad, or what was your approach and your conversations like? Because you're doing so much here and it calls for so much. How did you approach and talk about it with Joe?
I mean, the thing is, the situations that these characters are in are so severe, and nothing that most likely any of us will experience, maybe on, subtler levels. But I think that if you approach the character from a place of truth, and I try to really, like, when I'm going into a scene, I try to come in kind of with a clean slate and not know what I'm going to do in the moment. And I think in that moment, if you're present in it, the way you're reacting dictates what that performance becomes. And it helps when you have these incredible actors opposite you. And one thing that was so amazing about working with both Heather and Barbara is they're incredibly generous actors. They're like, we're 11 hours into shooting and it's my coverage and they're still giving 110%, which is everything. Because then my performance can still be truthful and I'm not like just acting with nothing, but trying to, self-create whatever it is. It really kind of becomes this like communal creation.
Yeah, I like that too. And also because you're kind of sharing the entity in a way. So there is a communal element there.
Absolutely.
I hope I have more time, but just in case, I saved the best for last, Jonathan, because I'm curious to get your take on something. I feel like your character, in my reading, is a kind of Rosetta Stone to the film. His relationship with Elizabeth is so impersonal that he calls her Doc. And maybe the closest he's connected with her, the best sex of his life, comes when she's inhabited by the entity. And it plays to this idea that these people don't really know each other too well. There's secrets, they don't even know themselves maybe too well. There are hidden desires obfuscated by social norms. I'm curious what your thought is on that and your part in the larger film.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. These two have just got along so well and had their careers. And we built it, me and Joe built it so that he was in a turning point in his life where he had been laid off right after the pandemic. It was like this man was trying to figure out his life and trying to find out who he is. Or like Joe's poster says, do you know who you are? So he was exploring it. And when Heather character shows up and has this entity inside, it was invigorating. It was like such a challenge. It took him out of his norm and it gave him a sense of self. And he identified with the submissive part of his nature, which he had never really explored before. So it was a thrill ride to do that.
That's awesome. I guess I have about a minute, quick lightning round. If you could inhabit anyone else's body for a few minutes, who would it be, living or dead?
Johnathon Schaech.
Oh,
Johnathon Schaech.
Heather Graham.
Be careful what you wish for. Wow, I don't know. I think it'd be fun to be like Katy Perry. That's just random out of the time.
Mhm. Barbara?
Maya Angelou, for all the love she had for everybody in the world and her promise of a better tomorrow for everybody.
Mhm, mhm. Joe?
I worked with her,
Did you really?
Wow.
how to make an American quilt.
Oh,
Great. As for me, I would say Stuart Gordon, just to feel like what it felt like to have be in his shoes spiritually. We did, but there was I met Stuart years ago, like many times at the Masters of Horror dinners, and whenever he would walk in a room, he had such a wonderful gravitas, like, because it was just like, this actually is perfect because he worked with George Wendt before a lot of times, and George Wendt, as we know from Cheers, anytime George Wendt walked in the room, Norm, Stuart Gordon was the norm of the horror community. And to have that kind of embrace, instead of it being like, well, me, who wasn't a master of horror, more of a masturbator of horror, if you will, walk to the door and be like, who's that guy? But Stuart was just so loved in the community. And at the same time, that man knew what he wanted at all times, whether it was on the set or in life. And to be able to step into his shoes for a little while, I got close, but that would definitely be someone I would want to body swap for a little bit, at least. Not now, no, like that would be weird and very claustrophobic, but maybe back then.
Well, it's a beautiful epilogue to his life and career, but it's its own wonderful thing. Its own wonderfully weird, wild thing. Thank you all for speaking about it today.
Thank you for your great questions.
Rebecca.
Yeah, you're awesome, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Matt.
Right.